Let's go back to our breaking news right now. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev sentenced to die. Right now, we are waiting to hear from the U.S. Attorney, Carmen Ortiz, who helmed the prosecution, and also from victims maimed, injured in the Boston bombings. They are expected to speak as well. As soon as they step to the microphones, we will bring that to you live. But let's bring back our legal team right now, as well as reporter Deb Fayrick, Gene Casares, Paul Callan, Jeffrey Toobin. Thanks so much, all of you, for joining us. Paul Callan, what was your initial reaction to the sentencing today? Were you surprised at all?
I was surprised because it's, of course, a Massachusetts jury, and we know statistically that they're opposed most generally to the death penalty in Massachusetts. But on the other hand, this case was such a strong case, Jake. If you ever were going to impose the death penalty, you know, they talk about only the worst of the worst cases. Well, what could be worse than this? What could be worse than the deliberate maiming and killing of innocent American citizens by someone who professed to do it for an ideological reason? It was almost
Paul,
like a military operation. Paul, I'm going to cut you off.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Paul, I apologize, but we see individuals stepping to the microphone right now. We believe these are this is the prosecution. Let's take a listen.
I want to begin by thanking the jurors in this case for their service. They have sat through months of grueling and oftentimes heart-wrenching testimony and evidence. They have been incredibly attentive, and they are to be commended for their commitment to their service. I also want to thank the many victims, survivors, and witnesses who testified in this case, as well as those who came every day to support them in court. Truly, the victims and the survivors are the voices of Boston Strong and the living proof that there was much love in this city on the afternoon of April 13th, 2 years ago. I want to thank them for their testimony and their presence. Our goal in trying this case was to ensure that the jury had all of the information that they needed to reach a fair and just verdict. We believe we accomplished that goal, and that the trial of this case has shown the world what a fair and impartial jury trial is like. Even in the wake of horror and tragedy, we are not intimidated by acts of terror or radical ideals. On the contrary, the trial of this case has showcased an important American ideal, that even the worst of the worst deserve a fair trial and due process of law. Today, the jury has spoken, and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev will pay with his life for his crimes. Make no mistake, the defendant claimed to be acting on behalf of all Muslims. This was not a religious crime, and it certainly does not reflect true Muslim beliefs. It was a political crime designed to intimidate and to coerce the United States. Although the defense claimed that the defendant was himself intimidated and coerced by an older brother, the evidence did not bear that out. The defendant was an adult who came to believe in an ideology of hate, and he expressed those beliefs by killing, maiming, and mutilating innocent Americans on Patriots' Day. Today is not a day for celebration. It is not a day for political or moral debate. It is a day for reflection and healing. Our thoughts should now turn away from the Tsarnaev brothers for good and remain with those who will live in our memories forever. Crystal Marie Campbell, Martin Richard, Sean Collier, and Lindsay Liu. Our thoughts and prayers should also be with the 17 brave individuals who lost limbs during the marathon bombing, and all the other victims and survivors who still cope with injury, with loss, and are still healing. As well as our hearts should be with this great city of Boston. After 2 years in investigating this case and 12 weeks of trial, it is time to turn the page in this chapter. I want to briefly acknowledge the hard work and commitment of the investigators, the prosecutors, and the victim witness advocates in this case, in particular, Assistant U.S. Attorneys William Weinreb, Al Chakravarty, Nadine Pellegrini, and Steve Mellon, Anyone who has watched their work over the last 2 years knows that the United States has not been better represented. Their commitment, not only in the courtroom, but to the victims and survivors themselves, has been incredible. I also want to thank all of my law enforcement partners, local, state, and federal agencies, in particular the FBI, who along with the JTTF, as well as Boston Police Department, Massachusetts State Police, Watertown, and MIT Police, worked tirelessly from the very beginning to find those who were responsible for these heinous crimes and to assist in holding them accountable. I have never been prouder to be a part of such a dedicated group of law enforcement officials. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Vince Lisi, the special agent in charge for the FBI's Boston field office.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank the amazing team that came together in the face of this horrible tragedy. And I don't just mean the team represented right here on this podium. I mean the first responders and the healthcare professionals who jumped into action on that horrible day and acted so heroically to save so many lives. And then the investigative team that came in behind them, who worked side by side and worked as one team to gather a tremendous amount of evidence that was used to convict this terrorist. One thing that people need to know is that the FBI and our law enforcement partners, we show up to work every single day for the victims who rely on us to bring these people to justice. And that's just what we did here. But the most amazing thing was the inspiration and motivation that these victims gave us every single day. It was their unimaginable strength was a constant reminder to us of why we had to keep pushing forward and pursuing every single lead. So to the victims, I just want to say thank you. Your strength has been nothing but inspirational and strengthened our resolve to continue to show up to work every day for victims of all crimes.
Any questions?
Did you read Bill and Denise Richards' op-ed in the Boston Globe? And if so, did you think about changing your approach with regard to the death penalty?
I read their letter and I responded to it. I believe the Globe, I know the Globe wrote a piece containing my remarks at that time, that what they had to say, their position was very, very important to me. It had a great impact, as well as really what also the other victims and survivors that I have encountered in this case have said. And that we came to this decision of pursuing the death penalty not lightly. And when I say we, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General who approved it, and there was a long, careful process in which there was a tremendous amount of input from different levels of my office and the Department of Justice. And when the Attorney General approved it based on the nature of the crimes in this case and the degree of the harm, we then continued on that path. Yes, Laura?
Were you sad or surprised that a death verdict was not returned for Officer Collier?
I would say that I don't want to comment on my personal feelings. I will say this, the jury had a really difficult job to do, and this was not an easy result for them to arrive at. And it was clear that they've been so attentive, so thorough. We appreciate the incredible service that they have provided, what they have been through, and so we're gratified with their service. And I will be reaching out to the Collier family, and I will personally be talking to them.
Given the long-term mercury prospects of the death penalty in the United States, do you think Tsarnaev will ever actually be put to death?
I don't want to speculate on that. I would believe so after all the appellate process and so forth, but I mean, I agree with you. It is a long process.
Confident that you charged anybody who had knowledge of this crime?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And our investigation has been so thorough and exhaustive that if somebody had anything to do with this bombing, we brought them to justice. And it was these two brothers.
Tsarnaev's wife, do you have any sense whether she might be charged?
I'm not going to comment on anything to do with anybody that hasn't been charged or convicted, any pending investigations we may or may not have.
Do you ever think of next steps that involving Tsarnaev? What happens next in terms of where he goes and how he might be put to death when and if that comes about?
Well, right now, Mr. Tsarnaev will remain in the custody of the U.S. Marshals. Be mindful that there is another...
This is CNN Breaking News.
I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. You're watching a live news conference where prosecutors and the FBI are discussing the jury's decision death sentence for the Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. Let's continue to listen in.
At which point, victims and survivors will have an opportunity to make an impact statement in writing. We've already solicited written impact statements from victims and survivors, but some obviously will be given an opportunity to be heard in court, and so we'll figure that out. But there'll be a sentencing hearing. The judge will then formally issue a sentence, and then the defendant will go into the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and then they will determine whether he goes to ADX or he goes to Terre Haute, awaiting the appellate process. But we have nothing to do with that. The Federal Bureau of Prisons will then be in charge.
Part of this case was something that you found that really drove you guys to consider the death penalty, or detail about what you saw about Mr. Tsarnaev's behavior that made you think we need to tell as much punishment possible?
When you look at the crimes that occurred here, the heinous gravity of the crimes, the number of deaths, you know, a child was murdered with a weapon of mass destruction. Another two young women as well. A police officer was executed in the line of duty. And so when you look at the gravity of the harm, and in particular as well, the many victims who became amputees, and many others who are suffering with other forms of injuries. And then you look at the motives, as we said in our case, the political motives. Really, this was an act of terrorism. Then that process began, and the Department of Justice approved a path that provided for the severest of punishments, a severe punishment for a severe crime.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Accounts focus on the moral restaurant. I guess, can you comment about the death penalty versus the life sentence now that
I don't hear the last part of your question.
Can you comment, what is your reaction to the jury's finding on the pressure bomb number 1, the marathon sports, that it was life sentence there versus death penalty?
I'm not at this juncture. I'm not going to comment on what you're asking me is really to go into the jury's deliberations. Obviously, they had taken their time. They were deliberate in how they made their findings. Only to say that, as we said, we are gratified with the jury's verdict, and we very much respect how they concluded it. Yes.
Massachusetts is known as a fairly liberal district when it comes to the death penalty. Were you confident that they would go for death, and are you surprised?
You know, how I feel about it really isn't at issue here. I think that you make a very good point in terms of the type of state that this is, but you have to realize that when you're in court and you're sitting as a jury and you're listening, you're the only ones that really have full access to all of the evidence, all the key factors that should be considered. You have the law to follow. I think that act has much more of a controlling factor rather than what your opinion may be. But clearly, never an easy decision. What I was confident of and what I think proved true is the tremendous work that the prosecutors and the investigators did in presenting this case. I thought that they, first of all, in terms of the investigation, they left no stone unturned. But in terms of the presentation of the evidence, I feel very gratified and very proud that we were able to show exactly what happened here, provide motives for what actually did happen, so that the jury could render a just and fair verdict. Go. I don't want to comment on that.
Did you view this as a referendum on the death penalty?
Well, Michelle?